about the forest?
My hair's like a forest,
Right.
depending on what part of the world you're in.
Yeah. And well, I want to talk to you about a lot of stuff, but basically, what are you doing right now? I mean, you and I met at WGN Radio,
Hmm.
and well, first let's talk about, I guess we'll talk about your radio career. What did you do in radio? How did it help you, etc.? What were you doing when I met you?
Oh God, how did it help me, etc. It's the foundation of everything I've done in podcasting, and everything I've done to be successful. Like radio is like you got like I tell everybody that like gets into podcasting, I'm just like you should have radio experience. Because what you can do in radio is you can get real time feedback from listeners, which does not exist in podcasting. In podcasting, you'll occasionally get like the Apple comment, or the stupid like 3-star review, like, oh, I didn't like they had mouth clicks or like whatever. Like, it doesn't tell you anything. What tells you something is when a host tees up a topic and you get like 20 phone calls and you understand exactly what listeners are thinking. Like, for example, we did a topic when the host I worked with, Brian Noonan, a was a substitute teacher on the side. He did radio and he taught, and his school started doing school shooter drills. This was like 10 years ago. This was like new. We didn't have this when we were kids, Margaret, right?
Yeah.
So he had school shooter drills and he teed up this topic and he was very thoughtful. And he was like, I want to talk to parents. How are you talking to your kids about these school shooter drills? Okay, fair enough. That's a really interesting topic. I wasn't a parent at the time. Would love to know, how do you talk to your kids about that? I mean, what do you say, right? It's different than a tornado drill or a fire drill. Like that's like nature, right? This is like talking about human nature and stuff. And every single call, without exception, every single call, we got like 40 calls. Every single one was just someone that wanted to yell about whether we need gun control or if we didn't need gun control. And no, not a single person answered the question. So what that taught me was that certain topics are so emotional for people that you can't talk about them. And like you've heard the saying, like don't talk about like gun control or abortion on a show. And you maybe you think like, oh well, yeah, because they're hot button. But once you understand and you talk to people who tell you, like you just hear what they're saying, then you're like, oh, that's what happens is people's brains like don't process it. So I have that knowledge that like you can't get from a podcast, right? You could release a podcast episode about abortion. There's no way you're going to get that feedback in real time. There's no way you're going to learn those lessons. And that's like a more extreme example, but multiply that by like, I mean, how many phone calls, because I was at WGN from 2008 to 2021.
Wow.
I kind of stopped working right around the pandemic hitting. So what, 12 years? Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah, and I produced for Brian Noonan's show. It was an overnight show on weekends. I interned with Spike Odell in the morning, so it was the morning show intern. Got the morning drive, reps under my belt. Did a lot of fill-ins. Got to do overnight shows during the week with Steve and Johnny. Got to do lots of stuff. Worked with Milt Rosenberg and many of the colorful cast of characters that came through that station in that decade plus, but mostly stuck with Brian. So it was on every weekend. But multiply that by how many phone calls we'd get. And we get a lot of phone calls overnight. I mean, I've probably answered at least 2 to 5. I think I did the math one time. It was like, I don't know, 3 or 4 thousand phone calls, or at least. I mean, how many of you've probably talked to a zillion listeners, right, Margaret?
Yeah, but I wasn't committed to a show like you were, but I filled in like at that time you're talking about, I did do the intern with Spike Odell, and then I did answer, phones for various people.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that I think is the experience you cannot and will not get from podcasting, no matter how big you think your show is. It's just not the same thing. Unless you're taking like real-time phone calls, in which case great. But it's also different because I had the luxury of being able to talk to them at length. Like the host is talking, right?
Right.
He tees up a topic. Maybe the phones aren't real hot that night. Maybe there's like 1 or 2 phone calls. A good host like Brian is prepared to just go. Like he can go. A bad radio host relies on phone calls. If you
Yeah.
rely on an external factor like phone calls to make a segment successful, then you're not good because you
Right.
need to be able to hold up your own, right? So there'd be a late night and maybe I'd get 1 or 2 phone calls. And if the listener wanted to argue something, I could engage with that listener. I could talk to that listener for like 5, 6 minutes. and just have it be a conversation, just him and me or her and me, and really get to understand their point of view and why they're calling and what they think of the show. I'd ask for feedback. If they said like, I hate this segment, I'd say why. So I'm sitting there basically doing market research while Brian's just like spouting off a topic, and he can go for 10, 20 minutes. And I'd get in a lot of trouble in the overnight because he'd be like, he'd start to talk to me on the air and he'd be like, Cody, what the heck are you doing? You've been on the phone for like 15 minutes or whatever. And I'm like, what? I'm producing back here, but also I'm getting a lot of feedback, and I'd take it to him after the show because that's what a good producer does is they synthesize that feedback and they say, here's what I'm noticing and here's how we can do things differently. I did not really answer your question, Mark.
No, it's okay. No, you were talking about radio, but how did you deal with the listeners who were sort of like needy, just wanted somebody to talk to, or the listeners who were super rude? And also when somebody gives their opinion or gave their opinion, how did you know that was not just that person's opinion and not representing, like 50 people or something?
Well, there's some bias there, right? Like like this is like if you get a review on Apple Podcasts that says, if you do a science podcast and they say, stop talking about black holes, I hate black holes. Well, okay. All right. Well, I've got 18,000 listeners, but I read the one about black holes, but now I've got it in my head that my audience might not like black holes because one person said that.
Right.
That's no good. So I would try not to do that. I would report stuff that noticed. I would give the context. Hey, one caller called and said this, and then we could make the determination. Does that seem reasonable? Like if they were offended by something, does that seem reasonable? We at 4:30 a.m. on a Sunday, we talked about we had this. I pitched this topic where the idea was some people say sex is like pizza. It's always good, right? Or it's never bad, whatever the saying is. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I pitched this idea. I was like, it was in my 20s. I think I had like bad sex. I was like, what if we talk about how there is bad sex? So we talked about that at 4:30 in the morning on an AM radio station. And a listener called and they were like, it's a Sunday. There's, for God's sake, whatever. It's like, all right, I produce a show on overnight Friday into Saturday and Saturday into Sunday. Maybe if it's a bit more explicitly sexual, maybe we do the Saturday, right? Like little stuff like that. Even though that was one listener, it's like in that case, I could see it being reasonable to have that opinion. And given our demographic, that seems like a reasonable thing we can extrapolate out to more of our audience. So there was a little bit of this, a little bit of that. In terms of rude callers, I mean, sometimes it's just like, okay, thanks, bye, and you just hang up on him. Man, I shadowed the producer of Steve Cochran's afternoon show back in like 2009, 2010. I don't remember the name of his producer, but whoever it was, man, he was not polite at all. He was just like, he was brutal. Like people would call in and be like, well, I'm not sure about that. He'd be like, oh, well, that's a dumb question. Like click, like it was
Oh my
brutal.
gosh.
And I was just like, I don't know about that. As a radio station, you're kind of customer service, right?
That's like
People
morning,
have,
well, that's like morning zoo kind of thing or sports radio kind of thing.
yeah. And like the person's not even on the air. So you're just like shutting him down for no reason. Like I wasn't a fan of that.
But I mean, well, when you were doing that though, well, why did you get into radio anyway? I'm
Mm.
just like mixing up my questions, but yeah, why did you, as I'm trying to figure out something else, but why did you get into radio?
Yeah, at Drake University, I was a radio TV production major. I I ran the radio station for 2 years and I loved it. I just really, I loved it. I loved talking. I remember if I was ever going through like a really bad breakup or having just a bad time in classes or there was drama with my friends or whatever was wrong in my life, the minute I would walk into that radio studio and hit my little theme music and sit down and just start talking, I was always so happy. And it was FM radio, but it was college radio, so you could kind of get away with whatever, right? I'd like rant about stuff. I did a segment where people would get because local movie theaters would send us like free tickets to independent films, or we'd get like CDs, we'd get singles and samples from new and emerging artists, and I would offer these giveaways, and it's like if you go to the dining hall and you bring me a taco salad wrap from Spike's, the first person to bring it to the station, gets whatever. So just goofy stuff like that. It was just always really fun, and I love radio. I also in my video courses, I liked TV. I liked TV production. It was, it takes longer. It was slower. I
Yeah.
could throw together a really good, fun radio promo, 30-second, 60-second radio promo in not that long, right? Versus one kind of landmark news package that I did about the Bulldog Brass Pep Band for the basketball team. It took days, and I would have gotten faster if I'd gotten more reps in with TV, but I liked the pace. I also was really, I was, it was horrible. I didn't like lighting.
Hmm.
I will say, like in the TV studio at Drake, it was so old school. You had to climb up on a ladder and, move the lights around like on a grid on the ceiling. So we're not talking about a very advanced setup that we're dealing with. If I were to light a live setup with a couple tripods or something, it'd probably be a little easier. But it was tricky. So yeah, I don't know. Everything just kind of filtered into radio. My internship was at Des Moines Radio Group. I got a little bit on air there during my internship. They did this fun little bit that I got to participate in, and I just always really liked it. And then when I was outside of college, after college, I applied to tons of radio and TV jobs. I got offered a morning show assistant producer job for one of the TV stations in Rockford and a morning show producer position for a radio show in Rockford. So, for context, for those who don't know, that's like top of the food chain, right? If I'm directing the show or I'm producing the morning show, that's kind of where you want to get to.
Yes.
But because they were small markets, it was paying minimum wage, and I would have had to stay living with my parents, who lived like 2 miles from the radio station. And instead, I decided to shoot my shot in Chicago. I had two of my best friends who were living here, decided to move to the city, kept applying, eventually got a part-time job at the WFMT radio network, which is the public station. They're up with the PBS station, basically.
Yeah,
And
classical music.
classical music. Yeah, exactly. And I was part-time. I became full-time after a couple months because the guy that was in a full-time position got fired for sexual harassment.
Oh gosh.
And so there was an immediate vacancy and they needed it filled immediately. And so I just filled it. So that worked out for me. And then I actually left that full-time salaried position to take an internship with the morning show at WGN, which barely paid. And I borrowed a lot of money from my roommate to pay late rent while I did odd like side jobs paying to pay the bills, because it actually did pay a small amount. It's like a few hundred a month or something. I mean, it was a stipend, but it wasn't. It was not sustainable, but it did remunerate me to some degree.
Hmm.
And then WGN internship shifted into producing Brian's show. He was looking for a new producer because his had just moved, and they tried out a couple interns, and he likes me the best, and I was the best. And I became his intern. I was also highly recommended from the morning show producer, so I was very fortunate. And I've been
Was
with
that
Brian ever
Jim? Was
since.
that
Yep,
Jim?
Jim. Yeah. Yeah, Jim's the man. Jim is the best.
Yeah, because I was with him twice, a couple times. I mean, I did the internship, I did it twice, I think. But or maybe I did it once, I don't remember. Yeah, so why do you love radio so much? Because you said that. You said it earlier.
It's funny. I listen all the time in the car now, and I
Like
just
like terrestrial or
terrestrial radio. Yeah, terrestrial radio. I don't have a satellite radio subscription. My parents do and have. I have listened to satellite radio. I'm not, a Luddite. But it's it's just what's going on. It's so exciting. Like being in a radio station is so alive.
yeah.
People are walking around just stopping by, having random conversations about, so it's not a static environment. No one is sitting there at their desk doing something. Even when you're interning and you're posting a podcast, like you're up and down. Back in the day, be walking to and from the production studio with a mini disc player, recording little things. Like it's such a lively environment. um and even later, like when I was hosting the Curiosity Daily podcast for Discovery, we struck a deal with the Westwood One podcast network. Before it became more politically right leaning, it was more of just a general interest podcast network at the time. But we joined them and we recorded out of NBC Tower, and we recorded in one of the studios of WLS. So where WLS is, and I think Q101 might be there. Um, I think Q101 is there. A handful of stations are there, is my point. They had a few. FM stations and their AM WLS station. So I got to walk around, and again, like they've got bands coming in and out of there. They've got vendors are coming and dropping off free food. You've got the sales team walking through. It's just like such a yeah, just such a fun, active environment. I just like
And
that.
and also because it's live. I mean, I know the podcasting's not, but it's everything is up to the minute and there's an urgency. That's what I like about it. And there's like a kind of terror, but in a good way, or if there's breaking news. And
I love live. I love live.
I
Like
love live. Yeah.
there's a I'm a video game guy, and there's a event that happens twice a year called Games Done Quick, and it's a 7-day marathon where for 24 hours a day for that whole 7 days they have video game speed runners go and speed run video games. And I'm obsessed with this event. And even if I don't know the game or I don't care about the game or I don't like even want to really watch it, I'll have it on in the background that whole week because it's live. And I know like people are there, they're doing something. I'm part of the action, right? Like I'm in my house, I'm sitting there, but I'm part of something, and it's I love that. And it's the same with now that I listen to terrestrial radio. I listen to podcasts in the car too. But I listen to Q101 all the time because they're giving stuff away. They're telling me about concerts. Like they said, Nine Inch Nails just sold out United Center in like a day. So they added a second show. And I go, maybe I should see Nine Inch Nails. Like I'm not a like I mean, sure, we all like Nine Inch Nails, but I wouldn't buy a ticket. But they're like, yeah, it's sold out. You should try and go. So, I call their hotline and try and enter for tickets. I'm texting him in my car. I've got the voice to text thing. I'm like, hey, Google. I hope I didn't turn on anybody's device. Send a text message Q101 with the word, what or whatever it is,
Mhm.
for the keyword. And I'm driving and texting, so I'm part of it too. Like I'm participating. I can call if I want to. Yeah, it's just like a live, and it's different than a podcast, which like can be good, entertaining content, but it very much lacks that liveliness and
Mhm.
that connection right there. That like I'm in the same time right now temporally as the host that I'm listening to. And that's exciting. There's something exciting about that.
I know, but now with music radio, I know for a fact I won't name which stations or whatever, but now they have it's not live. Like they do the liners ahead of time, even if they're in the city and they're broadcasting out of the city and they do these liners ahead of time and then they put it into the system, so it's not really live. It isn't live actually. And then another thing people do is they set up these calls, but they're not actually true calls. They're actors calling.
I've been on those.
Yeah, but
I've
it's
I've
not.
I've been one of the actors on those.
So what's that like? You don't give me the details like who it is, but what was it like?
Yeah, I was dude, I was 20, like 25 or 26. It was awesome. They paid me like $40 for a phone call,
Wow.
which at the time was like, yeah, I had to wake up but early. Like they're like, all right, 5:15 a.m. It was basically, I think, an agency of some sort. And they basically would say, like, all right, hey, you got to call. Here's the script for tomorrow at 5:15 a.m., 5:20 a.m. I would do like between one or two a week, I think. So you got to wake up. All right, call them at 6:10 a.m. or they'll call me at 6:10 a.m., 5:10, whatever it is, and you're gonna be this guy, and they'll put you on hold. And it would just have like, all right, the segment is War of the Roses. That was the main one. War of the Roses, where they would pretend to send they would pretend they would send roses to someone who's like not your girlfriend, I think.
Hmm.
And oh, no, no, no. They would call me and be like, who do you want to send roses to? And I would say, I want to send it to this person. I'm sending to like Alicia. Yeah, Alicia's really great. And then, but my girlfriend Susie would be on the line. And so Susie would hear this whole thing and then she'd be like, what the heck? And then like, sometimes there'd be drama. Sometimes there would be like, oh, you got to like pretend like you got like a job in another state or something. Or like you have actually got like 3 side pieces or whatever it was. So I had taken improv classes. And so they just gave you like a prompt basically, and you kind of go with it. And then they'd record it. And then, yeah, they'd say like, okay, cool, you're done. It was like 8 minutes. My sister lived in Alexandria, Virginia while I did this job, and she got to work one day working in HR. Her friend came over to her desk and said, I think I just heard your brother on the radio. She's like, what? Because she had heard my sister had played clips from WGN, like for her coworkers. They knew my voice. And they play it, and it was about me cheating on somebody. And my sister thought that I was cheating on somebody. So she calls me at like 10 a.m. She's like, what the heck? And she's like, she legit thought that it was like real. So that was pretty cool.
But
That
so
was
what
fun.
about that? That's not really live radio. That's sort of fake radio.
A totally fake radio. Yeah, I I don't mind if some of it's fake, right? Like some of everything's
Okay.
a little bit fake, but morning shows are pretty much live, even if it's there's like a minute delay or something. But anytime they're saying we're taking phone calls, like that's they're at least taking phone calls, right? If I call you and it airs 2 minutes, 3 minutes after I do it, like I'm okay with that. I'm okay with a little bit of delay. And I will say morning shows I prefer over afternoon shows for that reason. Afternoon shows do seem much more like what you're talking about. They do more of that.
No,
But
but same with morning shows. Like I know for a fact, I won't say, but I know there's some morning shows that have these actor kind of callers
mhm,
and they set
mhm.
up scenarios. It's sort of like reality TV, but with actors.
And those I'm not as into. I mean, like I said, I listen to the Q101 morning show and they don't do that, right?
Mhm.
They'll occasionally have they'll have like artists in. Like they had the guy from Shinedown, the lead singer from
Oh,
Shinedown come in, and I know that he was there live
yeah.
because they were reading stuff from the text line, and I hadn't thought much about Shinedown in the last 20 years of my life. Loved them in high school. I mean, they were good in high school. You know, I know they're like staring down the barrel of
Yeah.
a 45, right? But I wasn't a Shinedown fan.
Mhm.
And this 20-minute interview or whatever literally made me a fan. And I'm going to see them
Because that
this.
guy had
Oh,
issues, right? And he got over his issues.
I don't know about
Yeah.
that, but just the way he talked about the music and the way he made it and like the
Mhm.
different genres they've done and their new single, at the time, The Symptom of Being Human is an amazing song. I bought Shinedown tickets. My wife and I are going this fall. We literally, like, they literally sold those tickets to us,
Yeah.
and that's good content, right? So even if they recorded it a half hour earlier or something, sure, the live thing helps. So it's a combination with Q101, right? It's really good content, and it's a lot of it is live, and there is that element. So you kind of mix and match a little bit. But you know, with a podcast, you're not getting live at all, right? It's all pre-taped. So there's some elements of in a podcast you're never going to get. Whereas, you know, radio, at least they kind of mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I'm just typing in now because I did interview Brian a long time ago when he was in Philadelphia. And I want to interview Kenzie. I've met Kenzie. She's fantastic. So you just reminded me that hopefully they'll want to be interviewed again.
Would you interview Case, their producer?
Yeah, I mean, if they're, well, wait, does Case go on the air? Because I do hear that show sometimes.
All the time.
Okay.
Like he
Yeah, I
might
would
as well be a third. It might
yes,
as well
I
be
would yeah, I
the
would
Brian.
interview Case. Yeah. Because I didn't know the person's name all the time, but I do hear the show. Okay.
Yeah.
Listen to the show. Why do you
Yeah.
know him?
I do not know, but
Oh, okay, okay.
he reminds me a lot of a couple producers I've worked with in the past, and I think he's like 25 or 26.
Okay.
But he does a lot of their music interviews. Like he'll interview the artist, and then like they put that on the Q101 website. So he's a big time content contributor there. It's like me when I was on Brian's show. Like I was on Mike a lot with Brian, and Case is on all the time with them.
Yeah, so how did you get on the air? Because usually producers can't get on the air.
Because we had an overnight show with very few spots and a lot of time to fill, and there's nobody to talk to. There was this full time news guy, but there wasn't like, you know, sports and traffic and a whole posse of people. And sometimes calls were slow. I'll say for those who assume no one's listening at night, we had tons of listeners, tons. Truck drivers, security guards, many regulars, a couple DJs getting off like wedding gigs. I mean, we really did have a very loyal, very consistent audience that was very engaged. Like we got a lot of phone calls and sometimes drunks. And sometimes like in a happy way, sometimes in a sad way. Like and sometimes we were the people that we kept people company. There was an old lady they called. This is like, oh man, this is my like goosebumps, give me goosebumps story. But like an old lady called and she thanked us. It must have been 3 in the morning on a Saturday. And she thanked us and she said that she listens to us every night. She keeps the radio on all night to keep her company. And her husband had passed away like a year prior, 6 months prior, and they'd been married for 50 years. And she wanted to thank us because that night she said, "You guys just made me laugh for the first time since he passed away." And like,
Yeah.
what do you do with that? You know, I will never forget that conversation. Um, but anyway, we had a lot of people listening, but you couldn't always count on a ton of phone calls because sometimes people were just laying in bed listening. They don't want to call or working, you know, maybe working certain jobs they couldn't call. So Brian likes to have people to contribute to, and he's a funny guy, right? And he likes people to play off of. And I had been taking improv classes, and he knew that I would give him material. So I would play the goofy kind of weirdo nerd gamer. There was a whole night where like I only spoke in the Game of Thrones dialect before the TV show because I've been reading the books and I love language and I absorbed a lot of that. So I would be like, yes, and needs or near enough as makes no matter, Brian, or like whatever. I was better at it when the books were fresh in my head, trust me. And I could like throw stuff out and he could kind of roll his eyes and be like, wow, you're really weird, or throw out one-liners. And we just played off each other really well. And it was just a good dynamic. So he's just like, I'm just gonna pull Cody in all the time.
Hmm. Well, when you went into radio, did you want to be on the air or you just wanted to work in the business?
I wanted to be on the air. In fact, when I entered for Spike, we would start the morning show after Steve and Johnny, which was produced by Dan Chagru at the time. He's gone off to do other things outside of radio. But I asked Dan one time, I was like, do you want to be on the air? Do you want to be a host? Thinking like that's the natural thing you want to do. And he's like, nah, man, I just like producing. I like having the mic. I can throw in a one liner when I got a good one, and that's it. And that's always stuck with me for a couple reasons. First of all, it showed me that not everyone in radio wants to host. Second, it showed me that there is value in being a producer that just throws something in.
Mhm.
In fact, for the podcast I do with Brian now, Crafty Brewers, Tales Behind Craft Beer, I and our previous project, we did a podcast together during the pandemic. I don't like being in the co-host role with him at all. I like being in the producer role where I'm not being relied on. But if I have a really good question to ask, or a one-liner, or a pun, or whatever, I can jump in with it. And
Well, what's the difference between being a co-host or what's it like to be a co-host versus producer?
co-host, like there's just more active participation throughout a conversation. Uh, I is my sense of it. And having to drive, do the move the furniture, as some people might call it, right? The setting up their intro and just the minor stuff makes me nervous. Just introducing a guest has always made me slightly nervous. What if I get their title wrong? And I would confirm this stuff ahead of time. What if I slightly mispronounce their name? What if I say foundation? You're at the Science Foundation instead of the Science Association. When I interviewed Alan Alda for the Curiosity Daily podcast, I mentioned the Alda. He runs like the Alan Alda Foundation for Communicating Science. I don't even know the name of it, but I said the Alda Association, and his producer was sitting next to him, and he was in a pissy mood that day. Alan Alda, nicest guy ever. His producer was a jerk. And he was just like, it's this foundation or whatever. He boomed, and sitting right there across the table from me. I'm like, okay, sorry. And it threw off the vibe of the whole interview, and it sucked. But maybe that triggered me. I like gave me PTSD, and that's why I don't like intros. But I'm just not as comfortable with all that stuff. I'm so sorry. My phone just went off. What is wrong with me during an interview?
Yeah, but
Um,
when you were being but if you're being a co-host, there's always a dominant host. So you can just sort of tag along and then let him drive.
there is. I think maybe I'm just not a great co-host with Brian specifically, because he is a more conversational host, and you've got to kind of be ready to respond with him. And
But you have to be witty with him.
I prefer to be witty. I'd rather be witty than boring. Um,
Because can there also be the straight man dynamic? Like if somebody's not witty, he's the guy with the zingers, and you're sort of just allowing certain things.
yeah. There's a dynamic we've worked with. I think I don't like exclusively being the co-host and talking about stuff. There's also a lot of like, I'm also the kind of person who the way I think is in more general terms about things. So when I have an idea, I don't I don't always really fully flesh it and out and form it in a super specific way that makes it something that I could debate. So, for example, if I see something in the news and I'm like, well, the White House did or said this, even regular white, not just today's, but like even a normal White House, or Illinois passed a law about something, I might think like, yeah, well, I think it's done because maybe X or Y. But then in a conversational setting, if that gets challenged, like I haven't, it's not that I haven't thought it through, but I just haven't really thought, like, picked apart the details in my head. And then I'm put on the spot, and then it just becomes like either emotional or just kind of like really
Uninformed.
uninformed or vague. Yeah, it's not. I mean, Brian is, and I'm a smart guy, but Brian is an insanely smart person who has thought this stuff through. And if he has a point about a political stance or a story in the news, like he has thoroughly thought it through and knows how to argue his view. And I'm just not quite as good at that.
But see,
Um,
some hosts, what they do is they're not even thinking through what they're thinking of, is they're thinking of certain points, and then they're becoming successful from that, and they keep hammering simplistic ideas, and they get more followers and they make more money by doing that. So they don't really have to think it through it deeply. They just have to make it conform to their viewpoint.
yeah, yeah. There's a few different ways to do it, but I guess I just I'm more popular. I'm more popular.
Popular.
I'm more comfortable in the scripted territory of scripted podcasts.
But when you did the Discovery one, were you a co-host?
Ashley and I were both hosts. The difference was that was scripted.
Oh.
That was, well, there were several differences. One major difference is it was primarily scripted. So we would cover 2 to 3 science stories in a day in like 10 minutes. There were short episodes. I would always put in spots for ad libs. So even though we would get the scripts from writers or freelancers that I would then turn into scripts, a lot of those stories were originally intended for written publication. I would turn them into audio, right? Because you don't just read an article out loud. That's stupid. So I would rewrite them. I would put in some, like, occasionally like one liner if I wanted to, or I would put in a spot that said like ad lib here, where I could do a little bit of banter with Ashley. And there were recordings where Ashley and I would literally stand here where I'm standing now, and we'd be on Zoom, and it'd be like, okay, end of the story. And then it says ad lib, like your experience with, let's say it was something about like a forgotten food that had been rediscovered by archaeologists from ancient Rome, or about like a fish sauce. That was a thing we did. Like, do you like fish sauce or something like silly, right? I'd put like ad lib here, and we would just stand and look at each other for like a minute straight and just be like, And then if we came up with something, we did. Otherwise, no. But there was no pressure there. There was no like live to tape. And then and our dynamic was comfortable, but like neither of us we weren't arguing any like points, right? It was not a debate style thing. It was just, have you had an experience that's relevant to this, or an anecdote that you could tell? And like those are fine. And that's a producer type thing to throw in. When in the middle of a conversation, if Brian is telling a story about some restaurant that he went to that he loved, and he talks about like the worst experience ever, like with vodka or something, and I've got a vodka story, I can pull that out and then throw it out there. And that's what I would do with Curiosity. It's just that I was in that host role there. So that was kind of the difference structurally.
What does a producer do?
What does a producer do, or what does a good producer do?
A good one. I mean, I have Rick Camper's book about producing, which is everybody should read. Have you read his book, The
Mm-mm.
Producer's Handbook? Oh, okay, it's good. But anyway, so what's a good producer?
Good producer does 2 things. One is from an organization perspective, like a WGN radio. They ensure that the show is aligned to basically the best practices of the station. So, for example, when our boss was pig vomit, pig virus, what was his name?
Yeah, Kevin Matheny,
Yes, Kevin Matheny. So
the late Kevin Matheny.
yes, God, rest his
And by
soul.
the way, if anybody, this is my own plug, on my YouTube channel, Margaret Larkin, you can hear an interview I did with him back in 2010. I took part of the interview and I posted it there. So it's youtube.com/Margaret Larkin, but go ahead.
I'm gonna watch that after this.
Yeah,
Um,
it's an audio, of course. It was from the podcast, but it's like 20 minutes.
all right, yeah, Matheny was Howard Stern's program director, and Howard Stern nicknamed him that. So it's just what I remembered. Sorry, I couldn't remember his real name. But Matheny sent out an email. Colorful guy, strange guy, eccentric guy. His emails were all in like several different font sizes and colors. Like you'd look at him and you'd be like, "What boomer put this in like in paint and just like made it look goofy?" But I remember a vividly colored email talking about, "What's your take? What's, as you as a host, what's your take?" And the point of that basically was like, let's say like the Jesse Smollett thing, right? Remember when he pretended to be attacked or kidnapped or something, and that was like a hoax, right? You could get on the air and very easily be like, yeah, obviously he's lying. He's a bad dude or whatever. But it would be a more nuanced take. Like that doesn't make you unique. You could listen to 20 different hosts say that was basically Matheny's point. So what's your take that like, this stuff wouldn't happen if Chicago had X, Y, and Z, or like it's actually surprising more people don't do this because of X, Y, and Z, or whatever it is. Like get really specific in there about what your take is. And so part of my so that part one of like organizational support as a producer was I took that and actioned it, and I became Brian's editor. So he'd come in and say, here's my rundown for the show, here's what I'm going to talk about, and I would say, all right, what is your take for each one? It wasn't that like regimented, but we'd talk through them, and occasionally I would say like, this isn't super compelling, like this thing over here, there was some serial killer they caught in the north suburbs, like 12 years ago or something. And his take, the story was basically this guy got caught, he's bad. And it's like, well, duh, that's not really compelling. So let's put our spin on it, and helping craft and implement those kinds of things. And then the second thing is being the second advocate for the listener, and really actively helping ensure that the show is delivering for that listener. So, for example, on Crafty Brewers, Tales Behind Craft Beer, which I produce for Brian, and I as a regular producer, I've got a mic, I jump in sometimes, but we had a guest that was talking about a beer that was either named after or inspired by a certain type of brick in Chicago. There's like a brick that's used on the side of buildings in Chicago, but not the front.
Hmm.
I don't remember the name of it, but they mentioned this brick, and he's like, "Oh yeah, sure, sure, that." And at the end of the episode, I was like, "Cool, that episode was great. I have no idea what that brick is. I don't know what you're talking about. Can you go back and record talking about the brick?" And Brian's like, "Oh yeah, sure." It just hadn't occurred to him that our listener may not be familiar because Brian's a Chicago guy. The guest was a Chicago guy, and the other person involved in that recording was a Chicago person. I so we redid it, and then I edited that back in, and now anybody that listens, that's accessible to them. So it's an actively listening producer, and that can go with any time any response is unclear, or there's any other area for improvement for the listener experience to make sure that you're doing what your target audience wants to do. So those are what I see the two main things as. I don't know if there's other things I'm missing that I need to check. I'm sure there's a million other things, right, that you do, but I'll have to check out Rick's book if you're like, no, Cody, you're missing some big stuff here.
Well, what makes something compelling? How do you know if something's compelling?
If something's compelling, um, part of it you get from just being around the block a few times. But if I had to, I mean, if it's kind of like the elements of what make a good like news story, right? You learn about in journalism school, right? Like timely, relevant, prominence of the guests, something stuff like that. Like there's a similar set that I couldn't like recite to you for compelling, but I mean I would say like surprising is definitely one. Surprising and like educational, I think, are particularly, that's what resonates with me. So I tend to try and push those sorts of things. My favorite podcast right now is a movie podcast about the making of movies. And when they say something like, "Oh, they shot this scene in one take and the bungee cord almost snapped and killed somebody," or something like that, I'm like, "Oh, wow, that enhanced
Yeah.
my enjoyment of something." Yeah, surprising, funny, obviously, and funny can be subjective too, but like, just yeah, crazy things, ridiculous things that happen. I don't know. I've kind of a sense for it, but I couldn't tell. If I sat down and thought about it, I could probably write a list, but off the
Yeah.
top of my head, I can't really do that.
Because that would be good advice for you. Because some people don't even know what compelling is, or they think that as long as they have content, that's okay. That's okay by itself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tricky because like, my beer podcast is an interview-based podcast, and occasionally you get a brewer that's just a great storyteller. You don't have to do anything. You just I mean you do. You got to prepare and you got to do it well, but you hit play, Brian's funny, he's engaging, the guest tells a great story. You're good. You got a good episode. Other times like you go to a brewery, you set up all this equipment, like you hit record, you try and get something out of the guest. He's low energy, he's not enthusiastic, he's not that interesting. You try and crack some jokes, you do your best. And it's like, all right, well, I just spent a half a day of my life getting this. Like,
Mhm.
what am I, I can't not publish it. Um, so you
Well,
kind of do
you can
it.
edit it. Well, you can edit it down because I mean, I've
Yeah.
interviewed people where I had to cut out a lot because it just wasn't interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yes. And that's also what a good producer does if they're doing the editing, is get rid of that stuff. And those that you can tell those are if an episode if my episodes average an hour and one comes out that's 30 minutes, there was a lot in there that wasn't really great, you know?
Okay. Well, then also another thing is when you were saying that you produce and you like being off the air more, but you do go on the air sometimes. How do you know how to go on the air well? And do you think that improv is necessary?
I don't think improv training is like necessary. But I think knowing when to get out of the way is necessary.
Dan was
One,
very good at that. Dan Segru.
yeah, yeah. Practice is helpful, but a lesson I learned early on, I don't remember if I was taught this or if I learned it, but I used to host live cooking shows at there was a small marketing agency that ran a studio in River North called the Kenmore Live Studio. And they had these online cooking shows. This was like 2010. We're talking livestream.com. No Twitch, YouTube didn't stream. I mean, this was early. They streamed these little cooking shows. And after it was a startup, so they didn't, they figured out a lot as they went. They built the plane as they flew it. The original idea was get some chefs from these high-end restaurants downtown and have them come in and cook stuff. We realized quickly after like one episode, we can't just put a chef up and do a show. Like that's insane. You need an MC, like a host.
Oh, okay.
So we got a guy, we had another guy do it, and they started hosting. And then I became an MC and started hosting them. And what I
Wait, so
noticed,
what was it? Was this through GN or what was this through?
this
Like that
was
other?
a startup. It was my first full-time job after WFMT. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. In fact, I quit. I had our events were on weekends on the evening, and I actually had to quit Brian's show because I couldn't do that and overnight. And I quit. And then like 6 months later, our schedule changed, and I called up Brian and I was like, "Can we go out to dinner, like, and just talk?" And his producer that had come in after me was actually about to leave again. So I was like, "You want me to come back?" And he's like, "Sure." So there was I think it was like a 9 month stretch when I wasn't producing Brian's show in like 2010 or something. But this was I worked for the marketing agency. And what I noticed some of the MCs doing was just talking about themselves or giving anecdotes that weren't relevant or going off on tangents. And it's like people are here to like learn about the cooking stuff. They want to hear
That's
from the
true.
chef.
That's true. Part of it is like you should deliver what you say you're going to do.
Yeah. And my takeaway was like, what I would tell people is I'm like, the show isn't about me. If I'm emceeing, it's not about me. My job is to enable this person to talk. And knowing that is what has helped me know when to jump in when I'm producing a show with Brian or elsewhere. Like if I'm interrupting the flow, like if Brian's like midway into a question that's a follow-up to the previous question, unless it's really important that I get that timed in there right then, like it's not going to happen. And there's sometimes you miss your opportunity. Like I'll be like, oh, I should follow up with this. I'm ready. Brian fires off another one. Things go to the left. That moment is past.
Yeah.
I'll occasionally, if I think I can edit it back in and it's really important to get in there, like a context that's missing kind of thing, then I'll be like, all right, let's just pump the brakes, return to this for a second, and then keep going, and we'll do that. But yeah, knowing the give and take, improv helped, but I think just knowing like it's not about you
Mhm.
is the number one thing to understand.
When you're a producer, you mean, or what do
Yeah,
you mean?
yeah. Well, yeah, when you're a producer, knowing that what you're doing is there to supplement what's about to happen, like whatever's being said is what I'm about to say, making that better. Like, if it's like a pun or something, like we did I can't use that example. We
Eh,
we reviewed some beer, and at the end of the segment, Brian was starting to wrap up, and I made a pun about how old beer should be, basically, and it was extremely hilarious. I mean, Brian and his co-host were cracking up, and I know objectively it was funny. So that was like, I'm going to jump in because this is very funny, and then I just kind of headed out.
Hmm. Well, some people, when they're producers, they want to get on it there as much as possible because they want to eventually host. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, it's just a different skill set. I don't know. Yeah, I have hosted. Like I hosted on WGN 3 times. I hosted with Craig Collins once and then with Mark Carmen once. And I think maybe Craig a second time. Um and it's just a different set of skills. It's a different prep. It's cool to do. I would love to host like FM radio where it's a little more bite-sized. I'm not doing
Yeah.
like politics or anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a different beast. And I hosted a video game podcast with my friend John for I don't know, 6, 7 years, and that was really fun. But it was just so low stakes. So yeah, I don't know.
What's wrong? Wait, what's wrong with low stakes? I mean, what do you
If
mean?
low stakes is great. Low stakes is amazing. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Like when I say, oh, it was just so low stakes, it means like it was, when something's low stakes, it's just a lot easier to kind of jump in and do whatever. Like with the Super Bowl, we used to always have a show during the Super Bowl because Brian and I got moved to Sunday afternoons. We had a show during the Super Bowl for like 5 years. I went insane on those days. Like I was like playing absurd music. I think I came back with dubstep for every break, and I'm just like
Right.
screwing around. And anybody listening is like, "This is probably insane." Was probably like, "This is insane," but I was having fun, and I thought that was really fun. But we knew nobody was listening. Like 10 people were listening because it's the Super Bowl, right? You
Mhm.
literally can't compete with that. So, I love those stakes, and that's part of why we did such crazy stuff on the overnight. I think, and Brian was willing to just like give me a long leash and just let us do whatever. We had all these just weird, silly segments. The out of context quote of the night, I would just like record on in Adobe Audition during the whole show, and then like pull little quotes. And at the end of the show, we'd do that. Like, the intro themes, we would play. Like, I made this theme for. He had a segment around town where he'd talk about the events going on in the Chicago area during the weekend. There's like a 4:45 a.m. segment on Saturdays. I mixed like the Tenacious D Master Exploder song with like me screaming. So it's like around town. It's like just out off the wall because he kind of knew no one's like paying that much attention. It's
Yeah.
great. But I think that's part of why I was just able to host with John is because it wasn't so much hosting a show. It was more just like chatting, right? And that's a form. I think, there's a spectrum of podcasting, right? Like a radio host and like a Joe Rogan that's just sitting down shooting the breeze. Like
Yeah.
those are two opposite ends of the spectrum, and there's somewhere in between. So me doing a video game podcast, way more Joe Rogan-y. It's me talking to my buddy about video games. Like that's not a
Hmm.
big deal. Me trying to host like a show where Brian talks about like the law in Wisconsin or something like that. Like I can't hang with that, right? And then there's the scripted stuff in the middle where like most of it's scripted, but I'm throwing in some stuff here and there and trying to be clever, right? That's like maybe somewhere right in the center. Plus, I also edited that entire show, so I had 100% control over the breaths and the tempo and or back and forth and stuff. So that amount of control that I was able and did exert into that show was like pretty extreme. So yeah, I think across the spectrum, I've been speaking in generalities about hosting, but I think there's certain type of hosting. Let's refine what I've been saying. There's certain type of hosting that I think is better for me, and there's certain type that isn't quite. And for the producers that just want to be on the air talking all the time because they want to be a host, I think they need to take a hard thought about what they want to host and why they want to host.
Yeah. And also, well, podcasting makes it easier, although you're not going to get the bucks or it's very hard to make money. I mean, do you think it's possible to make money from podcasting?
No.
I mean, except for like Joe Rogan and certain people who are already in other parts of the media or certain influencers who have a plan. And I don't know how some people do it, but yeah. So why do you think no?
Yeah,
Because
no, I
people
mean,
ask me that all the time.
they can. It's yeah, that's a that's a big question. Anything can be successful, but like, can you make money making a a reasonably well produced true crime podcast with a marketing budget, like, yeah. Um, can you make money creating a video game chat show with your friend? No, that's been done. Um, Darknet Diaries is, yeah, a lot of us are familiar. Jack Reister. Darknet Diaries is probably one of the best examples of like a nobody nothing show, just a guy talking about the internet.
But when did he start that?
Not super long ago. It was like, I mean, in the last, I think I was at Curiosity. So I will want to say 17, 18 maybe. But there were enough shows around then, right? Like it's not like a Radio Lab or whatever that's been around for like 10, 15 years, like This American Life's like, um, there are examples of newer shows that kind of come up and you're like, oh wow, this came out of nowhere. But like, yeah, I mean, you gotta have a marketing budget. You gotta have either a marketing budget or an existing audience. If when Conan O'Brien launched a podcast, like
Of
he's Conan
course.
O'Brien, right? Like
Yeah,
this,
exactly.
yeah,
And
studios
also
and
he interviews A-list people.
there's too many A-list people crowding it out. I work on growth marketing for a business podcast, and Meghan Markle launched a show in the business podcast category, and I'm like, we're not going to be number one in business podcasts until that show has been out for a month. Period. It's Meghan Markle. You're not going to beat Meghan Markle in the podcast charts. It's just not possible, right? So it's crowded. Yeah, there's ways to monetize. Look, anybody can monetize, right? I've got a smallish craft beer podcast. If we find a hops manufacturer and we can tell him like, hey, we have a lot of listeners who are brewers, I think we'd be a good fit. We could charge them a little bit, a premium because we've got a highly targeted audience. You can always niche down and like do direct sales. But I guess my short answer to this rambling answer is my short answer would be, yeah, you can do it, but not in a uniform way. You got to find the way that works for your show, and it's going to be different for every show, and it's going to be hard no matter what.
Well, I think it's
But
because people see people making money off and they see these sponsors and everything, and then they think, oh, I want to do that. But who's making a lot? I mean, who's making a living from it? There are some people who have been doing it for a while, or
you got
what
to
do you
have a
think it is about those people?
you got to have a passionate audience who's like really into what you do. I think like people that get thousands of dollars a month on Patreon, they're the ones really hitting it. I watched I've been seeing a lot of Dean Withers on TikTok. Are you familiar with Dean Withers?
No.
He's like a 19 or 20-year-old kid who has not a photographic memory, but a wildly good memory. Who He's a political commentator, I guess, and he really dislikes Donald Trump. And he does all these streams that are like, debate me, why don't you like Trump? I do like
That's
Trump.
why. Well, now we figure it out
And
because
that's part of it, right? But no, but I was watching one of his streams, and he got probably like $2,000 in 5 minutes from donations.
wow.
He's just reading him off, and it's just like because he's a really good debater because he remembers every fact. He can like, he'll say something like, "Oh well, I don't like the Clean Energy Act or whatever." He'll be like, "Oh yeah, well do you know that like we exported this much oil under Trump's first term and this much under Obama, and here's what Kamala Harris was going to do, and here's what Biden did," and like he's got all the numbers, and you're like, "Oh my
Yeah.
God,
Well,
Charlie
so
Kirk."
he's got substance then because he's not
Yeah,
just some guy saying his opinion. It's compelling, and he also is talking about some controversial things. It's very
he's
timely topics.
he's got skills, but I feel like it's a low hanging fruit. Like I feel like if you hit something with your audience, and like if you hit a topic in a way that resonates with your audience, you don't have to be the smartest person in the world. You just have to do it right. Like you can make some money. I don't know. I feel like I see new YouTubers all the time that are on the left or the right,
Yeah.
like just ranting about politics. And I'm just like there was a guy, there was some YouTube video, and it was just a guy like sitting there. He played a clip from Bill Burr's podcast talking about how he doesn't like billionaires or something. And the guy just sits there for like 5 minutes after that. So this is like an 8 minute YouTube video. The first like 3 minutes is Bill Burr, which he doesn't even have the rights to. So okay, and then it's him being like, "Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing I have really to say to add to that. He's right. And then he kind of restates what Bill Burr says, and that's it. And it had like 400,000 views. It's
Wow.
like there's
So what?
idiots
Why do you
out
think
there.
that is?
I think because people agree, because people love confirmation bias, and they love to hear what they want to hear and think, they like to hear people say what they already think. And I think if you do that, like, yeah, I think that's going to help you be really successful. I think there are ways to blow up with very little talent or skill. There's poorly edited podcasts. There's bad sounding podcasts. There's people that don't really have a good take. There's people that don't have no take. There's people that just play like a clip of someone else doing something interesting for a minute and then talk about it for 5 seconds, have nothing to add, and then they make money. Like,
Is it
so
like a random thing? I mean, because if so many
I
people are doing that, how do some people make it?
recommend, I don't know, they catch the right part of the algorithm. Maybe they start with a small marketing budget.
Yeah, and you talked about having a good marketing budget. Do you think that really makes a difference? Like what is a good marketing situation?
Yeah, $5,000.
And what can you do with that? Is that 5,000 for the month or per year?
Just 5,000, a one-time investment. You work with a partner that optimizes. If you can run like digital display ads that drive people to a landing page that convert them into followers of your podcast, you can do that to essentially game the Apple Podcast charts, and that'll get you to number one on the charts, which increases your visibility. That gives you a halo effect. So anybody looking at the charts sees your show at number one for like a couple days. And that should be enough to kickstart your follower growth. You'll trail and linger in the charts for a little bit, for a while. You'll be in the top 100 for like a week or so. And after about a 2 week period, you'll have established a decent, like a statistically significant listener base. That could be in the high hundreds or small thousands. And having a base, I think, is what's most important to have. Then if you can engage them and make them love your content, then they tell people and then you can go. But you can't do that from zero. You
Mm.
can't have 10 people to listen to your show and love it and then expect to grow, because it all grows exponentially, right? So I think a $5,000 budget at front is what gives you the baseline that you kind of need to grow from there.
Well, how do you find a marketing pro that knows what they're doing and they're not just going to take your money and not do something smart?
You work with me. Uh,
Okay. Ooh, plug. I didn't even I mean it's sort of like playing volleyball. I didn't know you're gonna hit it over the net, but
Yeah,
okay.
no, quantum-podcasts.com, because I couldn't get quantum podcasts because some
Okay.
idiot's squatting on it. Internet website squatters are just the
Oh, it's
dregs of.
Radio Girl. Somebody's squatting on radiogirl.com. I'm not gonna pay a few $1,000s for that.
No, people suck. People suck. If you're a squatter on websites, you
Yeah.
suck. Work with me. Or more broadly, yeah, I mean, just make sure they're reputable, make sure that they've got a decent client list. When you talk to them, understand what the reporting is going to be. You'd want to work with some kind of professional advertising. You could work with directly with a couple different networks. One other alternate route also is getting appearing in in-app promotions. So like Overcast, Castbox, Player FM, other ones like that, like where you can pay to have your show featured at the top. Like there, you're going to get a number of impressions and a number of like the click through rate and stuff like that. They'll report on that. So as long as you're getting some reporting, make sure that you get some sample reports from other clients that they've done, and yeah, just get an idea of what you're going to get back from them in addition to just the actual promotion.
Wait, so do you ever sleep? Because you just mentioned you're doing a podcast, you have a full-time job. I know you're married with kids, you have this own business, and you do all these other things. Like, what are you doing? How many things are you doing at once?
I stopped playing video games for like a year, so that's sucked. No, yeah, I've got the full-time job. The number one thing I need to sustain any of this is a supportive wife. So my wife is an academic and I support her endeavors. But what that looks like is like, hey, there's a conference in Scotland where I can present this paper. Can I go for 5 days? And I say, great, yes, you can do that. And then I watch our kids, and that's fine. And she goes to teach yoga every Sunday downtown Chicago because she's awesome. And I watch the kids all day. It's like Sunday, I'm with the kids. Then she comes home and then we all hang out. Um, and conversely, if I say, hey, this Sunday when you get back from yoga, I'm going to go to a brewery for a couple hours and record and then come back later, great. So she's got my back there. I do not have good sleep hygiene. There are several episodes of Crafty Brewers that I finished editing at 2 a.m. On a Thursday on a Wednesday night, which is not healthy. It's not good. And then I would wake up very tired, and that is not something I recommend. But I have lost a lot of sleep trying to do that. The quantum podcasts, like I don't have a, I'll be I'll be inappropriately honest and just say like I don't have a ton of like work that I'm doing with them. I have a couple clients where I'll produce podcasts. They're branded podcasts, and those tend to have the best laid plans kind of situation where you get a branded podcast and the CMO says, "Hey, we're gonna do this once a month. All right, let's get on it. We're gonna start. It's April. We want the first episode out in May, and then we'll go." And then you email back and forth until September. And then they're like, all right, we're ready for our first episode finally. Then you record it and you produce it and you get paid. And you're like, that was great. And then you don't hear anything for a while. And then it's
Mhm.
April the next year. And they're like, hey, we're ready to start the podcast back up again. You're like, great. So like, not to throw anybody under the bus I have worked with in the past, but that's just the way the businesses are sometimes. They have shifting priorities. If they've got conferences to go to and video stuff to do, like that, whatever. Like podcasts aren't always really high on the priority list, right? So it's just intermittent. So I've got a couple clients that I've been working with intermittently. And then not that many people have not been knocking on my door lately. So I've got a very manageable schedule in terms of doing that stuff on the side. But that's usually more one-off stuff, and it's frankly like easier and faster than Crafty Brewers, because Crafty Brewers I'm going and setting up and engineering it and then mixing and all this stuff. Some of the other ones I don't like really record. They've got their own equipment. Some of the other ones I'm just doing like audio editing, not video. So it's manageable. And in those instances, that's when I say, hey kids, you want to go see grandma and grandpa for a day? And then they get a little day off, and I just take a Saturday to work or whatever. But
But how do
but
you have the
yeah,
energy to do all this stuff? I mean, like just having a full-time job and a family is a lot.
mm, I don't know.
Okay, so you're just high energy. Well, have you always been creative though?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like to think so. I was originally a music major. I was originally a double major in music and radio TV production, and it was a general music degree, not music ed or music performance. Just general. I was a saxophone player. Played. When I did the math at one point, I played saxophone 30 hours a week in college, playing or practicing. There's a lot of that, and I'm not that good. No, I wasn't that good. So I dropped it, ended up doing the radio thing. But yeah, that's
But do you like being busy?
yeah, yeah.
Because you don't like
I,
downtime, like sitting around or whatever.
yeah, yeah. No, I really enjoy having a lot of different projects going on at once, because then I can kind of like jump from thing to thing. I mean, I worked part-time at WGN, 13 years or whatever we said, 12, 13 years while having full-time work. Like I didn't work less than 6 days a week most of my adult life.
And plus, it was
Um,
overnight, so it was weird hours.
yeah, yeah. Which that was not great for my health. I will also say that. But I've always been a person that can function relatively well on a small amount of sleep. I know it's not good for me, and I'm not advocating that. And if you don't get enough sleep, like please do. I'm doing it wrong, but I can do that. Like if I need to stay up because one of the kids is sick or something till 3 in the morning, and then get up at like 7 or 8, like I can do it and be okay. So yeah, just a kind of high energy, I guess. And I always told myself like I want like my goal in life is to do less work, but I always like to get involved in stuff. Like I'm building a desk for my office. Like I've become like an amateur woodworker. I've got
Wow.
like all this stuff in my garage. I've got a live edge walnut slab that I glued up, and I'm like building a frame for it, and I got these legs that I'm going to attach. So like I'm going to have this giant custom desk in my office. I've been working on that on and off for 2 years though. So you can't say that I'm like very efficient. Some of these
I
things
know,
are
but you're
just,
doing a million things already
I know
because
I
people
am.
are already, because a lot of people, what they do is they go to work, they take care of the kids, and it doesn't matter. Even if your wife takes care of the kids, sometimes there's still that energy you have to put out. And then they watch TV and they go to bed. They don't, pick up like all these extra hobbies and so forth.
Yeah, I'm
So it's
weird.
incredible. Basically, what I'm saying, it's incredible you can do all that. I'm
Well,
tired
thank
just
you.
listening.
No, thank you. No, it's I'm pretty busy.
Well, what advice do you have for people who want a podcast? Because you said some people want to get going, but then they don't stick with it. And, why do you think people are going into podcasting? And then why don't you think they stick with it? Do they expect a lot of numbers?
Yeah. Yeah. If I go on like the Reddit, the subreddit, the podcasting subreddit, it's like I haven't read it in a while, but for years, every time you went, every post is like, how do I get more listeners?
Yeah.
And it reminds me of this. I think Steve Martin did a master class or one of those streaming lessons. But in one of the trailers for one of his comedy classes, he says, people always ask me, how do I get more people to watch? And my first question is, uh, are you even good? Like, have you even asked yourself how to get good?
Mhm.
And I think about that all the time because, like, you go to the podcasting subreddit and it's just people that are like, "How do I get more views? How do I get more clicks?" And like, I do sometimes they link to their stuff and you look at it and you're like, "This sucks. This
Mhm.
is you and your friend with one microphone like across the room from each other, like, and I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, what is wrong with you?" So like I think people don't stick to it because they want to see, big numbers go up, and that's just not how it works. But the number one piece of advice Christopher Michael gave me, the news guy at WGN, he said, if you want to get really good at hosting, here's what you do. You sit down at your computer, hit record, and then talk for 30 minutes. And then you hit stop. Now you do the hard part, you listen back to it. And that's how I've gotten good at podcasting and radio is listening to every single minute of tape I've ever recorded because I've edited 90% of it. Like Curiosity Daily, we did like 1,200 episodes. I hosted and recorded and edited every single one of those. Every single podcast Brian did that I would then edit, I listened to every single one of them. Eventually, it got to the point where I'd skim, and just look for like the ad spots. But I listened back to the majority of them, um, and same with every project I've done. So, like, most people aren't doing that. There's a lot of hosts that suck because they don't do that. And then like you get some hosts that are like, oh yeah, make sure that the editor can like edit out my ums and ahs. And hey, go back and listen to yourself talk, and maybe you'll stop doing the ums and ahs. I know I say like a lot because I listened to the last interview I did or the last something I did. I noticed I said like a million times. I know I've said it a bunch in this interview, but occasionally I've caught myself. So it's actually not as bad as it could have been if I hadn't been thinking that in mind. So if you're listening to this and you're saying, oh, Cody says like a lot, then imagine how bad it would be if I wasn't aware of that like tick that I have. And it's because
But
I
it
listen.
but it's not just saying ums and ahs because there are people who say ums and ahs and they still sound compelling. Well, first of all, what do you think a good host is?
Yeah, no, I think that whole thing is so it's garbage. I was a director of podcast production at a small B2B podcast agency, and we used to have in our agreements with our clients, oh, we'll edit out your ums and ahs, and I X'd that. I was like, that is a waste of time, that is a waste of resources, and it doesn't make anyone sound better.
Mhm.
If it's really excessive, then like, okay, fine. There was a guy that said, every single phrase in a Curiosity Daily interview, and I spent like an hour
Yeah.
editing that out. So, all right, I get
It's a
it.
crutch. Yeah.
There's a line, but that line is not 99% of shows. If you say I'm an ah, no one has ever unsubscribed from a podcast because the host said or ah too many
Well,
times.
look at Joe Rogan. He's not highly polished, but he's extremely popular because he knows how to be a host.
Yeah, you just have a conversation. Yeah, I mean, being a good host, I think, yeah, is always keeping the listener in mind. Because I've heard shows in their early stages of development where they don't have the host in mind, where sometimes it's two people that are
Oh, the
really,
listener mind.
yeah, the listener in mind. And sometimes it's two people that get along really well. They have a lot to say to each other, but they are just talking to each other. And it's like, no, 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 no. You are saying something that a listener is consuming. You can the talking to each other is kind of like the vehicle, but you're the person you're talking to isn't that person. That's at the end of the day, it's the listener. So that's what makes a good host is it's listener first.
But how do you think of the listener? I mean, what kind of listener do you think of?
So in podcasting, it needs to be really specific. And actually, in all of it, it needs to be really specific. Radio, yeah, you're broadcasting, you're not narrowcasting. So, but at WGN, like, no one listening is 20 years old. No one listening is 20 years old. No one wants to hear me review the newest expansion of Final Fantasy 14. They just don't. They want to, they're advertising Viagra medication on there or whatever. That's who you're talking to. So you need to know who it is and talk to that person. That's what you need to know. And for my science podcast, you need to run listener surveys for any podcast you listen to. Even if you're small, we ran a listener survey for crafty brewers. So I have a rough idea of the makeup of how many of our listeners are brewers or just beer aficionados, or how old are they? Are they men? Are they women? Look at your Spotify stats, see how many are men and women. just have a listener in mind, because you should be speaking to a specific type of person anyway, right? Like that's the goal, is when you niche down, you always win, kind of thing.
Mhm.
So that's what I would say. And you're not going to know what every single person's going to like, but you're generally going to have an idea of like what's going to hit and what's not. And you know, when we do the craft beer podcast, like, all right, if we're at Dovetail and he talks about a cool ship, most people don't know what a cool ship is. I still don't remember. I saw the cool ship and I don't even know exactly what it's for, but like we showed the cool ship in the video and he explained what the cool ship is. Great. But do you need to explain what a lager is? Maybe for like a second, but like these are people that drink beer, okay? And for people listening in Chicago, if I say, oh yeah, I went down to Goose, most people will probably know you went to Goose Island,
Yeah.
right? You don't have to say Goose Island Beer Company, you know, this blah, blah, blah. You know, that kind of thing. You just generally having some awareness of what might be standard nomenclature for whatever audience you're listening to. And it was the same with curiosity, big time. With any term I didn't know, I'm like, we're a science podcast for a general audience. Like, we need to explain what a neutron star is. I still don't remember what a neutron star is, but the
It
listener
sounds good.
might remember. Yeah, might remember what a neutron star is.
So what are your listeners? You said that for curiosity, it was general audience. And what about the brewery podcast? Who are the listeners?
The Brew podcast, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I do know it's more female. It skews older than your like average podcast listener. So 35 and up versus there's very little like Gen Z millennial in our audience. Um, and they kind of, almost more importantly than like who they are, is how they consume it. 2/3 of our audience watches the podcast on their TV, not just like YouTube, Spotify, it doesn't matter what platform, on their TV. That is massively valuable information, because I was looking at what should our summer publishing schedule look like,
Hmm.
right? And I was going to release an episode right before Memorial Day, because some people are like, they might make the argument, well, you know, some people go on trips for Memorial Day weekend, they drive, they're in their car, they want to like listen to a podcast in their car. No, only a third of our audience listens to this podcast. Everyone else watches it. Why would I release a video episode of a podcast on a holiday weekend? No, hell no. I'm not going to do that. So we just released an episode in like early June, waited for that to be done, but I'm not going to bust my butt posting stuff when people aren't in front of their TV. It makes zero sense. That is way more important than even knowing like how old they are and stuff like that. Yeah, the age you can do some stuff with. You know, there may be some terms I might not use, or I may not explain certain things historically, but man, any piece of information you get in your analytics can be really helpful.
Okay, so how do you see your stats? What are how do you see your analytics?
So I ran the listener survey, which again, I thought was enlightening to know that some people are brewers, some people aren't, some people don't even
How did
really.
you run the survey though? Did you email them or what?
Google Forms. No, Google Forms. No, never email. So, well, I don't have an email list. Okay, wait, let me back up. If you have an email list for your podcast specifically, yes, great, email it to them. If you don't, then don't do that. Never post your survey anywhere that people can find it who don't listen to the podcast.
Mhm.
I'm not going to tweet about it to my 20,000 Twitter followers, who most of whom don't listen to the podcast. Why would I? Because I want to know what podcast listeners are actually, saying. So we promoted it on the show, and then we'd put it in the show notes. Like if you're looking at the description of a YouTube video, you're probably watching the video. Okay, so fine. Put it there, promote it on the podcast. I
You
just
put
linked
the
to it.
form, you put the link to the form in your description?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, just to make it easier. And like I said, like no one's finding your episode and then just clicking on that link and not watching it, right? It just doesn't make sense. So we have a website, craftybrewerspod.com. So I had craftybrewerspod.com/survey please don't go there if you don't listen. It became a redirect to a Google form, which is just free. If you've got a Gmail account, just make a Google form. And then they would submit that way. The other way I get analytics is we're on YouTube and all podcast apps. I host on Spotify for creators because it's free and I like free stuff. So YouTube has some pretty good analytics. That's where we got the number of people who are watching stat. On Spotify, the company's been pushing video really hard, but most people listen on Spotify, but the vast majority listen on Apple Podcasts. So that's
Yeah.
also good information, because we know to ask people to rate and review if we want to do that. We ask them to do that on Apple, not like Spotify. And we used to talk about Spotify all the time and be like, oh, you can watch us on YouTube or Spotify. But now we're just like, just watch us on YouTube
Yeah.
and listen on Apple because that's where most people go.
Hmm. Wait, so you said you do put the form on in your Apple description or not?
No, no, not in the, not in
Okay.
the, not in the, well, I mean, yes, in the episode description, but not in like the show description.
Right, episode description. Okay.
Yeah.
And so when not many people respond to the form, you're not gonna have like 5,000 people, then how do you make the numbers make sense if there aren't as many people as your true listeners?
Yeah. The Tom Webster's got a book called The Audience is Listening. I can see it on my desk.
Hmm.
Definitely check that out. It's if you're listening to this, it's about how to understand who your audience is and how to grow it. The thesis of the book is basically you need to run listener surveys to know your audience, but he has guidelines in there that he can explain better than me as to like what the minimum size is. I think there's something in there like, you know, if you're not getting more than a couple hundred downloads an episode, you're too small, right? You're not going to get
How many episodes?
a couple hundred downloads an episode. I
Okay.
think is his general guideline. It could be a little higher or lower. You want to have a certain number of episodes out. If so, for us, we waited. I think we launched it when we were like the show had been out for like 16 or 17 months. So we had like 30 plus episodes, and we knew we were getting a couple hundred downloads an episode pretty reliably. And then when I look at the results, I I asked that question. You know, we did not get a statistically significant sample size. It wasn't like 10% of our audience. It was a handful. So I don't take it as gospel. I take it as an indicator, and I glean what insights I can. So, like, for example, one of the questions was, should we should we make Crafty Brewers shorter or longer? Should the episodes be shorter or longer? That's how the question was phrased. Every single person in the short answer, it's a short answer form. Every single person that took the survey said it's perfect the way it is,
Wow.
it in some variation. So I don't need to have like, 10% of my audience tell me that. The fact that consistently every single person answered a X or Y question by saying Z, like
Mhm.
that tells me we're on the right track, right? So now there's other questions that's like I kind of mentioned, are you a brewer? Are you not a brewer? Like what we got was a variety of results. And what it tells me is not everyone's the same. It doesn't tell me, I don't know if 30% of our audience is brewers or 10% or 50. I don't have enough data to know that, but I know that there's a variety in there. So I'm not going to ever say to somebody like, most of our audience is big beer aficionados or most of our audience is brewers, because I don't know that.
Yeah.
But what I will say is our show is the right length because
Nice.
that the signal was just so strong, right? So you balance how strong is the signal with how big is the sample size. And then I think, some questions just get thrown out. You're like, I don't know what to do with this, answer. But other ones are just so clear. You're just like, all right, let's go.
And then how often so the form's always up, but you may change the content of it.
The form, yeah, it's tricky. I should probably close the form and like put up another one later or something, or I could keep it up. I don't really know. Um, for a bigger show, yeah, I'll like run it for a month and then close it. And then let's analyze those results because I've got 400 results. I ran a survey with 400 results for a brand one time.
Mm.
So we dug through that. But yeah, for my smaller show, I haven't exactly decided. Like we got that initial data, we got a good run. Um, and I could promote it later. We might just like take it down, put it up again later. We'll see.
Well, how come, why do you think that some people do not get at least 200 per episode?
It's about your pre-existing audience on one hand, and then it's about algorithms and other pickup on the other hand. So Brian has a pre-existing audience. Brian and
That's true because
I,
he's on the air. Yeah,
yeah,
because he's a
Brian's on the
broadcaster.
air. WTM. He was on the air in Milwaukee. He actually promoted our show a couple of times during his radio show. He's got thousands of followers on social media. There are people that have been listening to him and me for a decade on WGN or other places. So it's the built-in audience, and that's such a huge part of podcasting. Like that's how Curiosity got big. We had like 2 million email subscribers for Curiosity.com, and then suddenly, hey everybody, 2 million email subscribers. Go check out this podcast. We got like 0.1%. 0.1% of 2 million is pretty big, right?
Mhm.
So that's how we did that. If you're not getting 200 listeners, it's because you don't have any audience. Like,
Mhm.
have your mom and 5 other people listen. Great. Like, are they going to do it consistently? Do they like the show? Who's it for? So that's why you got to either have an existing audience or paid budget.
Okay. And then what about converting from social media? Because some people have like 50,000 followers, but then their podcast is still not hitting it.
I have really strong opinions about this, and it's backed up by facts. Social media does by and large does not drive conversions to podcast listening at all. I've seen this time and time again. People don't scroll through a social media feed, stop, see a clip, leave social media, and go subscribe to a show. The vast majority. Curiosity had 1.1 million Instagram followers. We posted a reel from our podcast that linked to our podcast, and we had 3 clicks of 1.1 million followers. And I think the post had 40 or 50,000 impressions. So that's how many people saw it. So that's not a good conversion rate. And I don't even know if they followed the show right after that. Who knows? Um, our show, Crafty Brewers, I posted a clip on TikTok. We started a TikTok. I will say this. We have a YouTube strategist that I've worked with in the past that has said that TikTok can help grow YouTube channels. So I said, okay, there's also data showing that Gen Z is discovering podcasts on TikTok. So
Yeah.
this is actual research data that's out there, right? So I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm skeptical, right? Um, so we started a TikTok. I posted a video where one of our guests is talking about plum cider. Very representative of what we talk about on the show. Very on brand for us. It's got 780,000 views or 860,000. It's got nearly a million views now. It's got well over 3/4 of a million views.
You're talking
Um,
about TikTok, right?
TikTok on TikTok.
Okay, but
Um,
how many of those numbers are bots? Like phones in a room in China
Oh
somewhere.
no, they're not. They're. We had so many comments. There's
Okay.
no. TikTok is they just have an algorithm that's very friendly to new channels.
Okay.
Like YouTube, it's like really hard to like go viral. They're
Yes.
very, and same with any American social media platform. What I found about TikTok is like if you post one thing that hits really hard, you're great. There are a lot of channels that have like an average of a few hundred views per video, but one video will have like 2 million.
Hmm.
And this is part of why the platform is successful because they're inclusive with their creators.
Wow.
And I've enjoyed it. But we and hundreds of comments, so I know that people are commenting and they're real people, right? So um uh now a view is not I watched the whole thing, but it's an indicator that like a lot of people checked it out, and I've got the analytics to show that like this is good, right? Um, the week that happened, I think we got like 8 new followers or something. So like, all right, you know, even when you blow up, and like most people aren't looking at like 800,000 views for any social channel of anything they share, right? So we got lucky and it still didn't convert. So I just don't think social media is the way to go. And it's all these companies like Captivate Audio and all this stuff. And they're like, repurpose your content into social media content to get engagement or whatever. What you're doing is you're creating content that is good on social media for social media. It's
Mhm.
not good for getting people on social media to go listen to your podcast. So you need to figure out what your goals are. Because I'm actually in a philosophical conundrum now because our podcast is great, but we don't have 800,000 people watching our videos, but we do on TikTok. So now I'm like, and I just posted one the other day that got 10,000 views. And I was just like, what is my goal? You know, is my goal to have a zillion podcast listeners, or is my goal to like make good content that people see? And if it's the second option, I'm wildly successful. Like I'm very happy with Crafty Brewers, you know? Um, but you know, they're not spending an hour sitting there and watching my video. Like, but is that my goal? So I've had to do some introspection, and I'm not even there yet. I don't even know what
So you
my
haven't arrived at your goal yet.
nah, not really. I mean, the intrinsic goal is I like the creative element. I like creating video, crafting video. It's really fun. I love editing. I love editing, and I love meeting brewers, setting up, doing an interview with Brian, and then afterwards they sit down and they say, "That was the most fun interview I've ever done." Or, "Wow, you guys are really good." Or, "Wow, this was so professional." Getting an email later that says, "I had such a good time on your show. Do you want to do a beer collab at my brewery?"
Wow.
Like hearing from other brewers, "Hey, this brewer told me about your show. Can I come on?"
Wow.
Like showing up at Beer Under Glass in Millennium Park and going around to breweries, knowing 6 of the 10 people in this row and all of them being excited, genuinely excited to see us. None of that like, oh, it's the Crafty Brewers. It's like, they're like, oh, hey guys, it was so great hanging out. When can we do another episode? Like, that's cool. Like, we've got a good reputation and I feel good about the work we do. And occasionally they give me free beer, which I won't lie. That's awesome. But that it's the intrinsic enjoyment of it that I'm getting. And that's what a lot of podcasters miss and why they fizzle out and burn out. Because I've talked a lot about stats and analytics and trying to make the show bigger and all that stuff. And that I do like to do that. Right. I'm not going to do this if no one's watching. But at the end of the day, the value I'm getting out of it is so much less focused on external factors, right? It's focused on what I'm enjoying out of it. And I think a lot of people get into podcasting and YouTube creation that don't really care. They're just like, I'm going to make this and it's going to make me big. And it's like, well, do you like editing? Do you like producing? Do you like, going on Reddit and like shilling your stuff online? Like, do you like the grind? If you don't like the grind, you're not going to have a good time.
Mhm. Yeah, well, what do you like about video editing as opposed to audio editing, or do you like both, or what's the difference?
I like them both very differently. Um,
Because video is very hard to edit; it takes forever.
yeah, I got more reps in, so I'm faster at it. Um, Audio editing, I like the micro control. For Curiosity Daily, I literally would edit to a tenth of a second for breaths because there's a rhythm to it. I talked to an editor who is a musician. He's actually a composer. He edits some podcast, and he and I were talking, and he was like, he pointed this out that I never really realized because of my music background. There's a musicality and a kind of rhythm to everything, and the comic timing, right? Ashley and I would have jokes and I'd put it in a multi-track, and I would re-space things out to make the comic timing better because we'd record remotely sometimes. So if it was remote, the timing's a little off, but I would just tweak it. It's a massive control freak kind of thing. I'm like the Hitchcock or like the Kubrick of podcast editing, and just make it so that the timing was just like perfect. And I go back and listen to any episode I do, and I laugh out loud most of the time when something funny happens
Mhm.
because like I was just like I was good at it. I was really good at that. You can't do that in video. You don't have that much control. So there's less control. Video editing, I'm editing Brian, who is a live to tape guy. Like you just hit play, you go. I'll edit out some stuff. I'll make certain large content edits. This question and answer didn't work. Okay, cut that 2 minutes. But I'm not doing the micro. I'm
Well,
doing
but it's because he's a professional. That's why I like interviewing professional
yeah,
broadcasters.
yeah. Yeah, he's no, he's and he prepares. He's the best. What I like about the video editing there is the different camera angles a little bit, and it's
Yeah, how
just
many cameras do you have in your live? You have the front, and then you have the side to you.
yeah. I've got three. So the hard cam, and then I got a close up cam that only has a zoom lens that's like really zoomy. So if we're in a small brewery, I can't even use it. And then I've got a webcam trained on me. The camera I'm using for this interview, actually, it's a Elgato face cam, way higher quality than the Logitech 1080p one. This is a really good camera. So, and affordable. I think it's like $100. Anyway, the I like. I don't love spending too much time on swapping camera angles, but I don't know. I like being able to insert B-roll, tell a little bit of a visual story. In every episode, I do a beer break, and it's like a 10-second little jazz piano riff, and I throw in some B-roll of the brewery in it and like speeding it up and slowing it down. It's kind of fun to play with, you know? At the end of the day, I started doing video for Crafty Brewers because when Brian asked me if we need video, I felt like the trend was going that way. And I felt like, let's just do it. Like, I think we kind of need to be like relevant or whatever. Um, I don't think I prefer it over audio editing, but it's just different and it's a new skill. And I like the Forbidden Root episode looks like expletive, amazing. So good. Like the first 2 minutes, I'm like, holy God, how did I do this? Coming from not video editing 2 years ago to that, like check out the Forbidden Root episode of Crafty Brewers and just like tell me the first 2 minutes doesn't look freaking awesome. And that felt so good. So I just liked making something that felt so cool to make.
That's the creativity of it.
Creativity. Yeah.
That's like
Yeah.
with writing, that's with any, a lot of different things. You feel so satisfied creating and putting it together.
Yeah. Yeah.
But how did you learn how to edit video? Because, your shows look very professional. They look like TV shows. And the music too.
Thank you. The music's all stock music from Pixabay,
Oh,
Pixab.
Pixabay. I use that for images.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
they
didn't
have
know they had audio.
yeah,
Okay.
audio and sound effects. Yeah, the beer clinking sound, the bottle opening sounds effects at the start. All of the audio is from Pixabay. Great resource.
Yeah.
A lot of their stuff you don't even need to give attribution, so it's great.
Yeah, that's why I use our
Um,
images I use the open, whatever it's called, the open licensed
mhm.
images.
Yeah, it's great. Um, yeah, I use Pixabay for all those elements. I do pay for Motion Array is has basically Adobe Premiere Pro like plugins and stuff. I have done like occasional video editing since high school. So in high school, I learned like an early version of Final Cut to produce a video for my senior project. In college, I learned Final Cut Pro for like a couple video packages. Years later, I'd like download a Windows editor and just cut like a quick thing that I needed, or I'd download a video from the internet and I wanted to cut a little bit of it or something. Um, for my full-time job, they needed a little bit of help editing a couple videos. So I got basically a walkthrough spreadsheet where I just followed the instructions, do a little bit of stuff in Adobe Premiere Pro and Adobe After Effects. But so yeah, a little bit here and there and there and there. And then since I was in Adobe Premiere Pro, I started tinkering with a little bit. And I think it's close enough to Adobe Audition to where once you kind of get the flow and the look and feel, then you just can kind of pick it up. And then there's a lot of YouTube videos. So if I didn't know how to do something, just YouTube video. You can find a YouTube video for everything. And yeah, it's a process. It took 2 years. I don't want people to think like, oh, you can pick up video editing and whatever, especially with the amount of time it took me. Like we now have lower third graphics for me and Brian and the guest at the start of the episode that I added at least a year, and it's almost 2 years after the show came out. So it was probably episode like 35 or something when I finally got there, right? I didn't have B-roll in the first 20 episodes. So I wasn't doing certain transitions. Like there's so many things that have just been building. It's like you just start with like that base. We originally shot on my cell phone. Brian had a tripod with a phone clamp, and we literally shot on it was a Samsung, I think at the time it was a Google Pixel 7 Pro or something. And that was it. And I was
Gotta
just
use
like,
that.
yeah, I would pop zoom in and out for like to edit around something. And that was it. And then there was a webcam for me, and it looked like garbage, but that's the first like 20 episodes.
Yeah.
And then eventually I got a better camera because I had some money from a side gig, and I got a couple new cameras. And then
Well,
eventually
do you have an official business that you write this off or
I don't know if I write it out. No,
okay.
because it's an LLC, so I don't know if I talked to my tax guy about this. I don't know how much I can write off. I send all this stuff to my tax guy, and then he does
Oh, okay.
whatever he can with it. So maybe it gets written off.
But how do you deal with the patience it takes to learn a lot of video stuff? Because audio is so much easier in that way. I mean, I feel like you can spend a weekend learning certain things and you can put out a project quicker.
I don't know. I feel like audio is pretty hard, can be pretty hard. See, my wife once told me that she thinks I'm extremely good at learning new things. And um I guess that might be true. When I get an interest in something, I kind of latch on and get like really into it.
Okay.
I listened to a Tim Ferriss podcast about crypto back in 2017, right at the start of the kind of like public come out of crypto.
Mhm.
And I became totally obsessed, and I started investing a bunch and like learned all about that and got really into that. Um, Similar when GameStop started getting some buzz on Reddit, and suddenly half the internet was like, you could be a millionaire if you buy GameStop stock. I spent like 100 hours over a week. I spent all of my time for like 2 weeks looking into that and figuring it out. And I bought a little bit when it was relatively low, and I sold a little bit when it was relatively higher. So like, I was like, cool, I made a little bit of money on that. It's the same with video editing. Like if I want to do something, if I'm like, I want a lower third in these episodes, I'm going to go on YouTube, and I am on a warpath, and I will figure out how to do it. And I won't be done until I'm done. But same with audio. Like when we did Maplewood, the Maplewood audio was garbage, and I felt awful because I was so hype about this interview. It's Maplewood, dude. So I was like, I cannot get this hiss done out of here. We have an audio editor I work with for my full time job. I slacked him and I was like, dude, I am having this issue. What do you recommend? And he had this plugin from Waves Audio that just magically fixed it. And I was like, this is great. Then I had some video issues and I'm going on YouTube and I'm like, how do I fix this video issue? Like, if there's something I want to make happen, like I'm going to make it happen. So same with Photoshop, actually. Photoshop, oh my God, making YouTube thumbnails is my least favorite part of the entire Crafty Brewers process, but you have to do it. But I've been exporting these thumbnails and then it's like, all right, how do I like brighten up part of the picture? How do I like change the colors here? Like, how do I make it not look bad, you know? And it's just constant go on YouTube or like ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a great resource because it'll tell me exactly how to do it or give me an idea of what YouTube video I need to watch. Because sometimes otherwise, if you're looking on YouTube, you're just like, oh, well, this is a bunch of info. It doesn't really apply. Or it's like a 17-step process for color correction. And I'm like, I do not have time for that. Right. So a combination of GPT and YouTube and just like talking to people. Yeah, I just love learning stuff.
Well, what do you think? Do you think that AI? Well, what do you think about AI and using it for creativity, for content?
I use it all the time, all the time.
Oh, for content? Like what kind
Yeah.
of content?
uh Promos, podcast promos,
Oh, okay.
ad reads. There's because if you in I traffic ad copy for certain podcasts I work on. So if I get a brief from a client, if you've ever seen a podcast audio brief, which I'm sure many listeners of yours have, it says like, here's 3 bullet points, here's the 2 mandatory talking points, give your personal experience. And I'll feed that to it and I'll say like, add a couple jokes, give me 2 versions of the script, give me one that's a little smarmier, give me one that's like less sarcastic. And if I don't like the joke, I say like, okay, this joke's a little too like edgy, or we don't want to put down this group of people or like this, people. If we say like, oh, sell your crypto, like don't make fun of crypto people, like let's be inclusive. And I just talk to it, and the jokes it
Oh,
comes up with are pretty funny,
oh,
and
so you're talking about it's literally writing stuff for you.
literally writes the scripts for me.
Okay, so it's like a writing assistant.
Totally writing assistant. Yeah.
Okay.
For audio, I've used for early episodes of Crafty Brewers, I used Adobe AI Enhance to fix almost all the audio that was suboptimal. My engineering has gotten better to the point where I don't need that anymore, so that's good. Um, for AI video, there's a plugin that I use to cut vertical clips. That's like a whole, yeah, because to produce video for TikTok, there's all these AI assistants you can use, but they all cost money. So, but I got a trial of a plugin, and I'll put the video in a timeline that's 9:16, so vertical video, and then basically it'll automatically detect the speaker and then chop up so the camera cuts back and forth between the speakers, so it actually fits into vertical video. And I use that to save money on whatever. And then CapCut is kind of the preferred editing platform for TikTok. I did buy a CapCut subscription. It's like $80 for a year or something. And that has an AI auto captions generator. So I'll import the minute-long video. I'll say like generate captions. It'll do it. I edit the transcript if some words are off, which they're usually 5 or 6 words off. And then I export it from there. So oh, but that's not creative. Sorry, that's more process. Yeah, no, for creative, I think in my scripts, that's when that comes through. And last year, or a year or two ago, I produced and hosted a podcast called The Funding Blueprint, which was a startup podcast where I interviewed startup founders and VC investors for a startup. I did 30 episodes of that. And in the last like 7 episodes, I noticed my questions were getting really repetitive. So I started asking ChatGPT. I'd say, here's this person's bio. Here are the questions I normally ask. What questions would you ask to like branch out from that? And they weren't always great. I probably could have prompted it better, but I got 1 or 2 questions out that I thought were pretty good. That I think there were 1 or 2 where the guest was like, oh, that's a really good question. Like, actually, I hadn't thought of that. And we got to go a little bit deeper. So, I think like when you run into a creative wall or you just need some more ideas, it's always worth asking. And maybe a lot of 9 times out of 10, you get nothing from it, but occasionally you'll get a question or two or an idea or two that you can then expand on and then integrate into, whatever you're
Because I
doing.
noticed that I like writing myself. I mean, I don't want to ChatGPT to write stuff for me. I might say, I'm trying to figure out this one thing, but it'll say, well, I can do this. I'm like, no, I don't want you to do it. I'm just trying to troubleshoot. But I think it's because I like the process. It's like audio editing. I know that you can use certain AI to edit audio, but I want it to sound like a human
Mhm.
because sometimes AI audio editing is chopping predictable things and then it sounds weird.
Yeah, like I know Descript has like a filler word editor, and
Yeah.
I'm sure it's great in many ways, but like I wouldn't use that because I would be worried that it would take away some of the natural flow of it.
Now you obviously sound like an expert. I mean, I can tell also because I look at your LinkedIn and you've got some really good advice. And you're authentically passionate and you're authentically knowledgeable and you're successful. What do you think about the people who are, making money from giving people advice that's not exactly sound? Like for instance, we can get you, 500,000 followers on TikTok and your numbers on your podcast will go up. And you see that all over, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you
Or they even
know,
have webinars and stuff like that.
everyone's got to make money, right? I think
Or what do you think about the people who are coming later to the game? They weren't in radio like you are, and they haven't been podcasting for a long time yet. They're posing or they're framing themselves as experts.
yeah, I see a fair amount of that. You know, it's just the internet. Like I there are people I see on my LinkedIn feed who post about podcasting like twice a day, 3 times a day. I don't do that. I know, I know just from seeing their stuff and from knowing some of them personally, I know so much more about podcasting than them.
Yeah.
But posting on LinkedIn isn't a priority for me. Their priority is building a brand and getting clients and making money. And you got to do that somehow. I don't think most of them are being dishonest. I think they're just doing their best. Sometimes they're stating what I think is relatively obvious, but they're they're just trying to grind it out. And
Yeah.
being active on LinkedIn is helpful. I mean, I got hired by Curiosity because the CEO of Curiosity saw me on LinkedIn, found my podcast stuff, and literally like poached me from the consulting firm where I was.
Wow.
It was like I won the lottery. It was crazy.
Wow.
He's like, "Hey, can you hop on the phone and talk about podcasting?" And like a week later, I had a job offer.
Wow.
It was insane. And I got my current full-time job at actually I got a contract job that turned into my full-time role from LinkedIn. It's from a recruiter saw me and said, "Hey, do you know anybody who would be a good podcast editor?" I looked at the role. I'm like, this isn't actually a podcast producer like you said. It's like a podcast strategist, which is more what I'm looking for. And I ended up applying for and getting the job.
Wow.
But yeah, my last two major full-time roles really were from people finding me on LinkedIn. Um, and I don't even post that much. So I can only imagine how much luck they're getting. And for the brands that are saying stuff like, use social video to like grow your audience, like they're being honest, but I think what's happening is people that are being talked to aren't really thinking about what their goals are and they're not asking like questions about the priorities, right? Because posting a clip of your podcast on LinkedIn could get you 500 views on LinkedIn. But do you want LinkedIn views or do you want podcast listeners? And that's not the question that Captivate or whoever is asking. Because a lot of times if you answered, it wouldn't be what it wouldn't support what they're trying to sell you. So I don't think it's a dishonesty thing. I think it's just you need to really, really be very, very critical and skeptical of whatever you're being sold.
Because I know somebody who has a very popular podcast and he's been going for years, and he said it took 5 years to get the numbers up, but every place he went, this he started podcasting years ago, but every place he went, every place he spoke, he always mentioned the podcast. He always mentioned where to get the podcast, and he said it totally helped him,
Mhm.
like doing in-person stuff and telling people about it as a major part of his identity. And
That's
it worked because
interesting.
now he's got major sponsors
Yeah.
and he's got thousands of downloads every episode.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
but now, so like all the stuff that you're describing, you're obviously very successful. So what's it like?
I'm doing all right.
Well,
Um,
no, because you're working full time in, in podcasting. You work with a good host who likes you. Because I like that's a dream to get with somebody who is talented and who appreciates what you do. And, it's just hard. Like, just a lot of things you're doing are working.
yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, I mean, look, like, my full-time job is more of a growth position. It's not creative. I'm not doing the editorial content side. So like, there's a spectrum of like how much fun you can have in radio, right? At a radio station, there's hosts, there's producers, there's salespeople, there are HR managers, there's people doing traffic. And I'm in very much full time, like a marketing role. And that
But a lot of
involves,
people want that though. See, a lot of people want digital marketing and stuff like that, and they
mm,
can't get it. That's what I'm saying. See, I don't think you understand. Like, so that's what I'm saying about successful people. Sometimes I think that they're in it so much that they don't realize the level they're at.
no, I'm super fortunate. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is that if anyone's listening and like, I'm not necessarily doing the most fun part of podcasting. I'm doing marketing. And if you want to do marketing, yeah, I'm like, yes, dude, I'm very lucky. But what I have found is I think there's more opportunity for like career growth when you get more on the number side of things,
Yeah.
than on the hosting side of things. I created, produced, and hosted Discovery's flagship science podcast for like 4 years,
Wow.
and at the end of the day, I was a number on a spreadsheet, and Warner Brothers Discovery started bloodbathing everybody and decided to outsource the show to a production company. Um, I wouldn't have made a lot more money than I was making if I'd stayed. Like, it's just, there's a whole ceiling, unless I had like, gone viral and got crazy popular or something. I just think there was a limit. Whereas like marketing and growth and really supporting business objectives and that kind of thing, like supporting growth goals financially, like I think there's more opportunity there. Same with like producing and editing. Like, I love producing and editing. I will never have an editing job that pays as well as like any of the stuff I'm doing right now. Like, it's just strategy and branded stuff is just kind of more of, has a bit more room for the direction I think I want to go with my career. So that's, if I had advice for people that want to like really advance, I don't think becoming a podcast or radio host is like is the golden ticket, anymore. Even at WLS, not WLS, but there's a couple of stations where I've talked um, to to people that seem to indicate that like the money's not quite this much there either.
Mhm.
Right. When we worked with Spike, I think he was making like $1 million a year on the morning show. I don't think any host in Chicago is making $1 million a year on the morning show. Maybe, but I don't think that's normal. So,
But also another thing is that I always say now I'm thinking about how I talk. But when you think about what you're doing, sometimes you have to think about, what your priorities are. So, and you do so many things, like how do you prioritize?
oh,
Or what, like,
poor.
is everything important to you or?
I prioritize poorly. I prioritize very poorly. Usually, I prioritize of what I feel like doing at the time, and I prioritize. It's needs based first. So, is it between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m.? My priority should be work. Like, I shouldn't go down to my garage and sand my giant 2x4 that I've got for my table. I shouldn't do that at like noon, right? I should be probably answering emails and stuff. Same with like my family. My family, like I go do Crafty Brewers, but I'm not gonna miss something of my kids or like not take them somewhere because I've like need to edit a podcast. Like, that's not how I'm gonna be a dad.
Yeah.
So it's full-time job, pay the bills, and family first, and then it's kind of whatever I feel like doing. Crafty Brewers has deadlines, which my wife is like, can you find a hobby without deadlines? And it's like, that's fair, but it does kind of it gives me some structure, right? So
Yeah.
I know that if Crafty Brewers comes out Thursday and it's Sunday and I haven't started yet, Sunday night, I should probably sit down and edit for a little bit. So I'm not staying up till 2 a.m. on Wednesday, right? And same with the woodworking. Woodworking is more of a lot of times I need time to stand because if I'm standing like a table, I want that to be uninterrupted by my children. So that's got to come at a time where one is taking a nap and my wife's out with the other one, or they're occupied doing something so that I have time to complete the task, that kind of thing. So a lot of it's process of elimination, right? Saturday, 1 p.m. What can I do? Well, I don't want to sit in front of a computer. I don't need to work. My family stuff is kind of handled. Right now is the time to woodwork. So a little bit of process of elimination, a little bit of everything else. And then, like I said, sometimes just what I feel like, yeah, there's always something to do.
Okay. And then what kind of video games do you play? Because you said you gave it up for a while.
Yeah, I played Final Fantasy 14, the MMO, the massively multiplayer online RPG for like 5 years. After having kids, it became much harder to like log in regularly. So, not that so much anymore. But in December, I got Final Fantasy 16. And I finally beat that in like May. It took like 6 months to beat. Now I'm playing Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, which is amazing, which I started at the end of May and will probably finish in like December, but I'm like obsessed with it. I'm a Final Fantasy guy. Um, but on my phone, I play Hearthstone, which I hate that I like, but I'm kind of obsessed with it. And I play a card game called Balatro, which was really hot like several months ago, but I'm like way behind the curve on that. But yeah, I'm a
So
nerd.
yeah, I'm just wondering how you find the time to play video games when you got all this other stuff going
Yeah,
on.
I didn't. So yeah, part of the reasoning behind Crafty Brewers taking a lighter release schedule over the summer was I wanted time to play games.
Mhm.
And again, I stay up later than I need to some nights. But also, my wife has been working on a couple like research papers. She's been like pretty busy with like writing projects and things that take up some of her evening time. So it's something for me to do like after the kid bedtime, and it's not like cutting into family time or anything.
Now,
But
yeah.
yeah,
Now, have you ever considered doing live streams on Twitch about games or playing a game or whatever?
I did with my video game podcast. I live streamed on Twitch. It was Game Life Balance was the name of the channel. I live streamed it. I played through Shovel Knight, and I did like a review of Pac-Man Championship Edition DX. I did a couple Let's Plays. They were really fun. So there's another example of like video editing. I don't even know what software I used. God, that would have been like 2011 or something. I don't even know what software I use. I literally have no idea. But I did something. And the YouTube videos are really fun. I did a couple unboxing videos because we were trying to, this was before YouTube did podcasting, obviously, but we were trying to grow a video game YouTube channel. So I did a couple unboxings, a couple Let's Plays, a couple live podcasts at Gen Con, actually, that we then published. We interviewed people from Extra Life and a couple other charity organizations. So we threw a lot of stuff at the wall, but no, if you look at the numbers, like 99.9% of people on Twitch don't make anything.
Hmm.
It's a massive time commitment.
Mhm.
And I just don't have an appetite for that kind of thing. At this point in my life, if I win the lottery and I get like $1 million, and it's like, what are you going to, or millions of dollars, it's like, what are you going to do with your time? I could see myself retiring and doing like a 3 hour day gaming channel or something, if I wanted to, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. And
It,
anything else? I have to go to work soon.
oh, oh gosh. Um, no, we didn't talk about awards.
Oh yeah, okay, your awards. Yes, you're award winning at this point. So what's going on with your awards?
I've won a lot of awards in my day.
Wow.
No, awards are fun. I like winning awards, but I just um I there's like I don't know that this it scratches an itch of like some of that validation that's always fun, but they're not like great for growth. So the Crafty
But
Brewers won the best video podcast, which is great, but like no one sees that and like goes and checks out the show. It's just like, oh hey, I won an award, and it's nice.
no, but that's good because then you can say award winning and you can also put in your LinkedIn and your
We can say
website.
that. Yeah, and we're putting in our emails to guests. We're an award-winning podcast. Do you want to come on? So it's cool in a lot of ways, so yeah, I don't know. I just like to mention that I'm aware that it's like it's cool, but it's not like gonna change my life in any meaningful way. But it's cool. It's cool, and I
Oh shoot, I like
encourage.
awards, man. I mean, I applied to like 5 awards. I won one. I was runner up for two, and I put on my LinkedIn because there are many years behind that,
Yeah,
and I'm glad I won an award.
yeah,
So
yeah. I think I like to caution. I think like. I kind of fell prey to my own ego, and I spent like $500 on award submissions last year. There's no reason to do that, and it was like because everyone wants to win an award, right? So I think I think I wanted that to share that as a cautionary tale. Like, make sure you know what you're getting yourself into, and make sure like how realistic is it. Like, if the Quill Podcast Awards is free to enter, nothing to lose, great. Like the Webbies, am I going to win a Webby? How realistic is it that I'm going to win a Webby? What's the category? What do the winners look like from previous years? Like, do the research and make sure you're not just like being super like buying a lottery ticket, right? Being
Mhm.
super optimistic, like, yeah, I might get something for this. Like, make sure that you're tempering your expectations before you buy something, because like you can spend a lot of money that like I should not have spent that money. That was like very stupid. But here we are.
Well, I don't know because I spent money too. I mean, I spent quite a bit. I just thought, no, I want to try because I used to do awards for WBBM for other people. And I
Yeah.
thought, wait, now it's my content. I want to try for me.
But you
So
knew your stuff was good enough. I feel like you wouldn't have done it if you
that's
like,
true.
I feel like you knew,
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. I thought
And
I had a chance. Yeah.
I thought like I had a snowball's chance, but I did like to seriously think I could have gotten a Webby, and it's the type of award too, right? Like,
Mm,
the winners of the awards that you enter for.
yeah.
I knew what a Webby award looks like, and like we were not a Webby award winning podcast,
Mm.
like so that's what I'm saying is just like understand the context before you like go and yeah, just be mindful because we all have egos and it's easy to like get sucked in and the excitement. I could spend like $1,000 on award submissions, but like should I? Probably not.
Yeah, it's not wise. So anything else?
No, thank you for this. Man, you got some hard questions. This is
Nah.
hardcore.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I mean, I've been doing this for a while, but I'm not as successful as you. But that whatever, it's just my thing. Because
That's
I did a webinar, a podcasting webinar, and I said to them, I know the rules and I'm breaking them. So I don't, I sort of have I have my own plan. So I'm
perfect.
not going for the big time. So.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop. Oh yeah, and another thing is at the beginning, Facebook changed something on me, so I was trying to